Do you ever feel out of touch with the people who are bringing their kids to your youth ministry because maybe you're too young or you don't have any kids of your own? Do you feel like you can't minister to the parents of students because you're single? Or do you feel like you can't relate to them because you could literally be their oldest child? In other words, are you beginning to believe the myth that you're too young to minister to parents? Hey, stick around. We are going to unpack this. Now, here's the deal. You might be thinking, I have a hard time relating to parents because I don't have any kids. I get it. When I first started in youth ministry, that was me. I've been doing youth ministry for 16 years. And when I first started out, I was newly married, but 0 kids. And it was a little strange to be trying to impact not only the youth, but the parents of those youth who could legitimately have been my parents. And so it's really hard to see how you can relate to these people, especially if you're young or even, gasp, single. Or how could you relate to parents if you've got young kids and they've got teenagers, right? We're dealing with a completely different ballpark at that point, right? Maybe you believe that myth. Or maybe you're believing another myth. One that, hey, I'm so young, there's no way that I can relate to parents. I don't have the experience. I don't have the life behind me that these parents have. That might be you. Look, they've just been on the planet longer than you have, right? They've dealt with issues you haven't faced yet. You've simply got fewer years on your belt. And so maybe it just feels weird and awkward to hang with parents because statistically you're just younger than they are. Or maybe you're believing the lie that I'm just the fun youth pastor. Look, somebody else can minister to parents, right? Let's let the community pastor minister to them, or the men's pastor, or the women's pastor, or the senior pastor. Literally any other pastor, please. Could any other pastor minister to these parents? Because your job title is youth pastor, right? It says it right there in your name. So even if you're older, maybe you just kind of think, it's not my job to minister to the parents. That's the job of the senior pastor, right? Hey, but what if I helped you take that narrative, that myth, and think about it a little bit more? The reality is your love for students is already ministering to parents. You may not have kids, and that's fine. One of the best ways that you can minister to youth group parents is by loving their youth group kids. And if we buy into the myth that we can't relate to someone just because we haven't had their exact experience, then we can't ever relate to anybody. I'm a dad of all girls. And if I believe that I can't minister to someone who's got all boys just because we parent a little differently, then I'm believing that I can't minister to any of the parents in my youth ministry. Or maybe you're thinking, I've got only young kids. I've only got infants. I can't minister to people who've got teenagers. This is a lie that we buy into. And even if you're single, it doesn't mean you can't minister and love someone who's married with kids. That's a lie we've allowed ourselves to believe. We got to get rid of it. And hey, instead of allowing our lack of experience to keep us from ministering to parents, what if we use that lack of experience as just a natural curiosity that allows us to minister to parents better? I like telling the story like this. Imagine you wanted to travel outside the United States and you've never traveled abroad before, but you found someone who had, right? You'd want to ask them questions. You would just be naturally curious about the whole process. You'd want to ask, where did you go? What was it like? What'd you eat? Where'd you stay? What was the best part of the trip? And what was the worst part? Do you think you'd want to go back? And if I were going to go on this same trip, what would you say I should do? Those same principles apply to parents. We can show them that we care just by asking them about the experience that they do have, rather than focusing on the experience that we don't have. And then next, we can remind parents what joy looks like. Like, I get it. I love youth ministry. I love to have fun. And if you're a youth pastor, there's a high chance that you're seen as the funnest person in the room. But just because you know how to have a good time, it doesn't mean you can't be serious when you need to be. It also doesn't mean you have to throw joy out the window when you're ministering to someone who's older than 18. Besides, what's that verse? But for the joy set before him, Jesus endured the cross. We're not talking about playing just some silly games or even just being happy. We're talking about something deeper that's inside of us that maybe a youth pastor can plug into a little bit better because we live in joy. And we can remind parents what that looks like. That's a good thing. And we can show parents what joy looks like as easy as we can playing some crazy game on Wednesday night, as we can sitting with someone who's just lost a loved one or a relative who went to go be with Jesus a lot sooner than we thought they were going to be. Hey, can I offer you some tips? Here are some suggestions, things that have worked for me as I've ministered to parents and things that I hope will work for you as well. First off, parents are on a journey. Ask them about it. Ask them questions about what it's like to have teenagers. In fact, you can ask them, hey, what's the best part about parenting your kids right now? Even ask them what's the most difficult thing about ministering to these kids. How has having teenagers brought you closer to God? And even more accurate at times, how has having teenagers made your journey difficult? Or has having teenagers made faith more difficult? You could even just say, hey, I hope to have kids someday. And if I do, what would you suggest? You'd be surprised how willing parents are to talk about their kids just because you ask them about it. Maybe have some nuggets that you really cherish. And I get it, as youth pastors, we can look at parents of teenagers and not really want to emulate what they've got going on. But the reality is no one's perfect. And when and if you ever have teenagers, you might think back to these conversations and how they were parenting their teens and go, maybe I was a little too quick to judge. Here's another tip. Show maturity even if you don't have it in age. Be the one who offers to pray. Be the one who sends out a card with a verse on it so you can encourage a parent struggling with their faith. Be someone who is quick to dive to scripture. Offer to sit and just be present with the parent when their teenagers' life choices are causing them grief and sadness. Look, just because you aren't old doesn't mean you can't offer up spiritual direction to someone who is older than you. Wasn't that Paul's whole thing to Timothy? Don't let anyone look down on your faith because you are young. Well, we tell students that all the time. I wonder if we need to preach it to ourselves. And then last, remember that there's nothing wrong with having fun. Parents are tired. They've gone to 6 different kids' activities. They've paid 100 bills. They've worked a full-time job. They've tried to squeeze in a date night, probably taken care of aging parents, and more than likely fixed something in their house, their car, or even on their lawn. By the time they show up to church, it's just possible they're drained from all of that. Remind them of the joy that we have in the Lord. And maybe with a smile, a handshake, or even a quick prayer. Look, our students love it when we remember their name and what's going on in their lives when we ask them about their week. I wonder how our parents would feel about that if we offered them the same kind of care. Look, I get it. You got into youth ministry because you felt called to teach and lead the next generation of believers. Just because you're young, it doesn't mean that you can't have a lasting impact on the people who brought those teenagers into the world, even if they threaten to take them out of the world. Be a blessing to parents, and you will bless your church and your youth ministry. Hey, keep it up, youth pastor. I believe in you. God has got some great things in store for you, and it might even happen this week at Youth Group. I'm Ronald Long, and this is the Youth Ministry Insider. Hey, youth pastors and ministry leaders, I've got some exciting news for you. On November 28th at 1 p.m. Central, I'm hosting a webinar you don't want to miss. It's called How to Communicate Like a Pro, and it's all about taking your youth ministry communication to the next level. In this webinar, we're going to dive deep into the art of digital discipleship, covering everything from mastering email and texting to harness the power of social media for your youth ministry. We're also going to explore effective church communication strategies and more. If you've ever wanted to build a stronger connection with your parents, your students, and your church community, this webinar is for you. I want to equip you with the knowledge and skills you need to communicate like a pro and make a lasting impact in your youth ministry. So mark your calendars for November 28th at 1 p.m. Central. You can register for the webinar in the link below and join me as we empower each other and work towards strengthening our youth ministries. Don't forget to subscribe and share the news with your fellow youth pastors. Let's make a difference together and level up our communication game. So we'll see you November 28th at 1 p.m. Central Time for How to Communicate Like a Pro. Stay tuned for more updates, and I can't wait to see you there.